Hello and welcome back to another episode of Notion Bonsai. And in this beginner bonsai video, we're going to be showing you how to create bonsai from Cedar of Lebanon. We're going to be working with some young garden center material, giving it a basic shape and setting it up on its way to becoming a great bonsai. So I'm here today again in Attila's garden, and this is the species of tree that we're going to be working on here today, the Cedar of Lebanon. And as you can see, this is the kind of material that we're going to be using to create something that looks a little like this. And this tree was styled by Attila only like 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah.
And I think it looks fantastic as a first styling. So that's what we're going to show you how to do today, how to turn something like this into something like this. Attila is here. How's it going?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Yeah.
All good, all good.
It's good to be back.
It's always, you know. So we're going to do another Cedar of Lebanon. These are a garden center material. Although, if you know me well, this one was grown from seed. Again, we're working with our own material as much as possible. So this is a 3-year-old tree.
Wow. Personally, I think that the Cedar of Lebanon is a fantastic species for beginners to bonsai. They've got these really nice needle-like foliage, really similar to that of a Japanese larch. They grow really fast, and they also don't mind being in a somewhat wet soil, as long as they aren't waterlogged sitting in like a tray of water. So what we're doing today is I'm going to work on one of these trees, then after Attila's going to work on one of these trees. And this will just give you guys a flavor of the different ways of approaching a piece of raw material like this. Ways of wiring, ways of pruning and shaping. But before we start, the tools that we'll be using in this video today are some twig cutters, branch cutters, some wire cutters, and some gin pliers. Now again, by no means do you need these specialized tools. If you're a beginner to bonsai, you can get started with some ordinary garden scissors. These are the ones that I got started with. They're relatively cheap. Just make sure that whatever scissors and tools that you do use are clean and sharp, as clean cuts cut so much better than a blunt pair of scissors that kind of squash the branch.
Okay, so guys, if you're new to bonsai, the most common gauge of wire, what I use personally, it's from 1.5 millimeter up to 2.5 millimeter wire using on the branches. Obviously this depends on the thickness of the branch, but most of the time this is the gauge what I use. You will see, if you will have more experiencing on wiring, especially of the trunks, you can go up to like 4, 5, even to 6 gauge of wire. Depends on obviously the species what you're working with, even some like how bendable the trunks are, or how flexible, you know, the species are, and how they're going to respond to that wire. We might go up to 3 to 4. That's where we have all the differentiations, and just let's see how it goes.
And when working on a tree like this, I like to work my way from the bottom of the tree to the top of the tree. And as this tree is right now, I don't really want any branches on the bottom third of this tree. So for that reason, I'm just going to cut off some of these lower branches. And my main goal with removing these branches is also to show off the trunk line of the tree. Because in bonsai, if you can show off the beautiful trunk line the whole way from the bottom to the top, you've almost solved the problem with that tree, and you make it look significantly nicer. I'm just taking off some of these shoots here. I'm also going to remove these branches here. If you wanted to, you could have kept these branches, wired them downward, and kept the tree quite straight. But because I want to give the trunk of this tree quite a drastic bend, that's the reason I'm removing these lower branches. This is another one here that I don't think works. I'm also going to remove these little suckers growing on the trunk. I'm going to take the branch cutters and just clean up these little stumps, just so that it's a little bit more flush. And now at this point, before I go ahead and start messing around with any of these branches on the upper portion of the tree, I'm going to wire the tree and then later deal with these branches once I have a twist and curve in the tree. Before you wire a tree, it's good to test how flexible it is in different directions, just to give you an idea of how far you can push the tree, especially if you're going to give it quite a drastic bend. And I think for a tree of this thickness, instead of putting quite a thick piece of wire on the trunk and having that shape the tree, I much prefer to double up 2 smaller thicknesses of wire, and I find that gives me a little bit more control over the bend on the trunk. So for this, I'm going to use 3 millimeter wire. And if you're new to wiring, before you wire, it's first good practice to measure how much of the wire you're going to use. That way you don't waste any wire. I'm going to measure it right up the trunk here, cut that there. And to get the wire started, I'm going to stab the wire into the soil, just a little, and then begin to coil around the tree. And with each coil, I would like it to be about 45 degrees. I find that gives it the best hold. And you also want the wire to be fairly tight. Some people think, which way should I wire the tree? Clockwise or anti-clockwise? And I think that really depends on which way you want to bend the tree. So as you bend the tree, you want the wire to tighten. So because I'm wiring this way, the tree will bend this way. As you get up to the foliage, it's important you don't trap the foliage with the wire. So do take your time as you wire the tree so you don't trap any of these little delicate branches. So when I get to the end here like this, you can just grab the pliers and coil that up and around. So that's as far up the trunk that first piece of wire has taken us. It didn't quite reach the rest of the tree here. So with the next piece of wire, I'm gonna add a little bit extra. That way we got double the strength hold up to this point. Then as the tree gets thinner and tapers, we've got one piece of wire to hold this. And as I wire the second time around, I like my wiring to be quite neat. Of course, you don't have to have it like this. You can also space the wire out, but as I wire the second time, I'm just following that piece of wire that we wired the first time so that both wires are nice and close like that. As I get to the top here, I can see there is this branch which I'd like to keep as the leader of the tree. In here, there's one going off to the side and another here in the middle, which if I keep any longer, we'll get a swelling in this area. That's known as inverse taper. We really don't want that, so I'm going to get rid of that branch. I'm also going to make the decision to remove this branch and just allow this one as the main leader of the tree. I just feel that this is also going to create inverse taper over time. And then I can continue with the wiring. And as I get to the top here, it's getting a little bit more delicate because the branch is getting thinner. So what I'm going to do is create what's known as an open coil. And this is just where we wire a coil just as we normally would, but instead of having it tight around the branch, we just coil it so that it's open like that. And this is more just to guide the branch into the direction of growth. So now it is time to give this tree a shape, and this is really down to how much movement you want to put into the trunk. You could have a slight movement, then wire all the branches down to give it that aged look of an old tree. Perhaps your tree might even be a little bit slanted to the side and you want to use the wire to straighten the tree. But in my case, I really want to go drastic with this and justify the reason for removing these lower branches, because that's where I want to create a drastic bend. So I'm going to begin bending this tree, and when you bend so drastically like this, I think it's a really good practice to grab it like with your whole hand like this. It's a lot easier to bend. It's also a lot easier to twist and tighten the wire as you bend, because if you start using your fingers and bend like this, you could put accidentally too much pressure on one spot and snap the tree. Although this is a really flexible tree, it is good practice to bend like this with your whole hand. I'm just going to bend it down. I'm really watching to see if there's any splitting or cracking on the trunk. So we've got something like this now. If you wanted to, you could turn this into a cascade bonsai, but I'm going to bring it back up around now, like this. That's giving it that classic bonsai S-curve. So now that I have given this a basic shape, what I'm going to do is remove any branches that's growing on the inside of the bend that I have given this. In general, with bonsai, we don't really want branches on the inside of the bend, but before I cut any off, I'm just bending them to see if they would work wired out first. Like that could be a potential branch coming out that way. I know this one here for sure is just growing in the wrong place. With this one here, instead of just getting rid of it completely, I'm just going to shorten it to there. That opens the tree up more. You can see more of that trunk line that we really want to show off. And then finally these ones growing on the inside of the bend, I'll get rid of them. So Attila and I were just talking about this particular situation here where we have a branch going straight down, but just opposite that, we have one growing straight up. And you may be tempted to just remove both of these because none of them follow the principles that we're trying to follow, where you remove the branches going straight down and straight up. And I think by removing both of these branches, and if you just kept doing that the whole way up the tree, you could end up with a tree that has nothing left on it. So in this case, where although they don't really follow the conventions, I think it is good to have a tree that still has foliage on it. So for now, what I'm going to do is wire the majority of the branches on the tree, set them into a good position, then perhaps at a later date we can come back whenever the wire is taken off, the tree may have pushed out new branches in better spots where we could then come in and take these branches off and leave the new ones to develop in their place. So rather than leaving the whole tree bare, it may be good just to shape the ones that you do have and work with what the tree is giving you. When it comes to wiring in bonsai, we generally follow a rule called the 2-branch principle, and this is essentially where we wire 2 branches together with 1 piece of wire. So in this case, I'm going to wire this branch to this branch, and by doing it this way, each branch is anchored to the other and they will hold each other in place. This can take a little while to get used to if you're new to bonsai, but after a few goes and practice at it, you'll get the hang of it pretty easily. So before I start, I'm first going to measure the wire along this branch and along this one, cut it here. And a good test whether or not the wire will hold the branch or not is if you take the wire in your hand like this, hold it about 5 centimeters from the end and push it against the branch. If the branch moves, then the wire is thick enough to hold that branch. But on the other hand, if you press it against the branch and the wire bends like this, then you'll need a thicker gauge of wire. So I'm first going to go around the trunk of the tree with the wire, laying it against the branch, and then going around like this. And then with the other half of the wire, I'm going to come up around the trunk, then up this branch. Again, you can use the gin pliers to help you. And now that I've wired these 2 branches, as you can see, you can position them how you would like. And now I'm going to apply this 2-branch principle to every single branch on the tree, wiring it from the base to the top, working my way up. Now I have this tree all fully wired. Now it's time to give it a styling, and that simply is just positioning the branches in a basic triangular shape. Most bonsai have this conical or triangular shape to them, so what I'm going to do is try and get this foliage as compact and in a triangular shape as possible. So for that, these branches here I'm going to wire down. This one I'm going to bring up, maybe give it a little bit of movement to make it more compact. I'm just turning it so the foliage of the Cedar of Lebanon is facing up. That way, when the sun hits it, it can photosynthesize more efficiently. These ones here growing straight up, I'm just going to position down. You can actually use the gin pliers to help you with this, just shaping the tree. Now this one here growing on the inside is quite long coming over this way. So what I'm going to do to shorten it, instead of pruning it, I'm going to bend it back and then bend it back in. So as you can see, by just giving it a little bit of movement, you can shorten that in. Again, I'm bending it down, the same on this side. That can give us the other side of the triangle. This is just getting a little bit too long here. I'm just going to prune that there. And now finally for the apex of the tree, this is probably one of the most difficult for beginners when it comes to, you know, what do you do with this top part? How do I make that look like an apex without it look like it's just a shoot going up? One option is just to prune it right here. You can do that by all means, but I really like to use this and whip it back down on itself. So I'm just going to bend this down like this. And then after giving it that sort of U shape, I'm going to like flatten it out by twisting it like this. And then this extra piece here, I'll prune off. And my goal with this is then to allow one of these side branches to become the new leader and apex of the tree that way. And I think that's all I'm going to do to this tree for now. Now that I finished styling that tree, now it's Attila's turn to work on his one. But if he does anything differently than I did, then I'll come in and ask him to explain what's going on, why he's doing it that way. Just right off the bat here, what's going on with the top of the soil?
So usually what I do as I start to working on the trees, I don't want to take off too much material from the top, but just let's dig down a tiny bit off. You see all the roots, and we're kind of going to the autumn season, which we don't want to disturb the roots if it's possible. So we just kind of like cleaning up a bit. It's going down, and even just take off the, you know, the weeds and all. So it's kind of like a little bit more neat, but that's really it, what I'm going to do. And obviously a bit of moss on the trunk growing, so you just take these off.
What happens if you leave it on there too long?
Because it accumulates lots of moisture, as moss would keep the trunk too wet, so it could, you know, rot away. Too much moisture is present on the trunk, so it's better just to take off, just clean that, just clean up a bit.
I decided to double up thinner wire.
So
You're using a thicker one.
your way as one way, because as you've seen, it did the job. I just do a bit of different approach. I like to use a bit of thicker wire. I think it's more like a personal taste as well.
Yeah.
Like what works with you better. I was trying to, as you did, you know, wire the whole trunk. Although we not sure that if we will keep the whole height of the tree, but it's always the better way that we can always come back to it if you don't like anything and just like even shorten back. So as you see, as the front, what I choose from this side, it might be a weird for you. My viewpoint is you're not going to see the tree always from the same angle, right? I have a viewpoint from here. We have all that way, and it kind of goes against the principles that we shouldn't, you know, hide the main trunk.
And now, as a bonus part of this video, this is the great big Cedar of Lebanon that we both worked on earlier in the year. As of today, it's about 3 months ago, and as you can see, this tree has grown quite a bit since then. It's getting a little bit more ramified.
Yeah, it's looking great. We probably, as I said, next year we can do the second styling on it, you know, a bit more like detailed out with the next wiring session, and we will see from there.
And on that, I'm going to end off this video right here. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like in this video. It really helps out the channel a lot with the YouTube algorithm. Let us know what you thought of our trees. Is there anything that you would do differently? Perhaps you would have styled them maybe in a formal upright style with no curve in the trunk at all. I'm always open to new and different ideas in bonsai. If you would like to support me and the things that I do on this channel to help me continue making videos, hit the thanks button down below. And also a big massive thank you to Attila for having me here at his garden today again. And if you'd like to stay updated on all the things that I do off camera, please follow me on Instagram. It's at @NotionBonsai, and you'll be able to see all the things that I do on there. But on that, thank you so very much for watching.